For quite some time, I was the only Android user that I know that would also wear an Apple Watch. Now, granted, there were a couple reasons for this. First of all, I often would have an iPhone in my other pocket, so quickly accessing notifications was really easy. Second of all, I really think the whole package of the Apple Watch felt just more complete to me than the equivalent Galaxy Watch. Having access to every single app I might need, or access to the Apple ecosystem, or the whole fitness features, all of them felt better to me than the Galaxy Watch. And then I really felt it was a lot more comfortable on my wrist than most Galaxy Watches that I've experienced. So I was really excited to finally get the opportunity to transition out of the Apple Watch into the Google Pixel Watch. It meant that I'd still have support for my existing ecosystem and not have to keep an iPhone in my pocket in order to do anything. And what I found is it's changed everything. Finally, I feel like there's a smartwatch for me and something that I could regularly wear on my wrist without having frequent pain. Let's talk about it. This is InnoIso, and this is the Google Pixel Watch review. When the Pixel Watch was inevitably leaked, like it seems just about every other Pixel product has been, it was pretty heavily criticized, and for one big reason, and that was the size of the bezels. Since I've used the watch, I haven't stopped to think about them at all. Yes, technically, the screen relative to the size of the case is relatively small, but honestly, that doesn't bother me too much. This is something that Apple has really focused on with more recent watch models. They've had more and more improvements, increasing the screen size and making it basically fall over the edges with curved edges. And honestly, it doesn't feel like all that much of an improvement over just having a, smartwatch like this, for example. Yes, it is nice to have a bigger display on a smartwatch, and I found that when I was using the Apple Watch Ultra, which I absolutely loved, surprisingly, but it really doesn't make a big difference in most cases, especially when all I need for a smartwatch is just to have it on my wrist to easily access notifications and a lot more that we'll get to. The design of the Pixel Watch has often been called an Apple Watch clone in some ways, or it's been drawn parallels to the Apple Watch in that it's basically all metal and glass. But that's not a bad thing. A lot of people were really worried about this curved glass display that just bubbles over the entire device, but I haven't seen a lot of people having issues with it cracking. And frankly, it's more likely that it will scratch before cracking because of the Gorilla Glass that it uses. Now, granted, after 6 months of use, I haven't noticed substantial cracks on my display at all, which is saying something considering every single watch that I've used in the past, including the Apple Watch Ultra, has experienced pretty substantial scratching. Now, I recognize that I am an anecdote, and maybe on a broader scale, people have problems with the display scratching, but it's not the case for me, and I actually really enjoy the full curved glass look over the equivalent Galaxy Watch. To me, side by side with the Galaxy Watch, this looks a lot more premium, and it doesn't stop to call back to the design of earlier watches before smartwatches. This doesn't have to look like a normal timepiece. Now, I do like the fact that it's round because I think that's just naturally pretty on the wrist. But outside of that, it doesn't look like a regular watch in any way, and it really doesn't have to. The easiest description that I have of the Pixel Watch's design is seamless. It just looks very smooth and pebble-like. The only thing that breaks that, smooth, curved mold is the crown, which, yes, I will freely admit that I prefer the rotating bezel of many Galaxy watches, but the crown is not a bad input method to me. I don't really use it all that much. Now, Google has made it a lot more central to the operating system than in past versions of Wear OS, but it doesn't really feel required. I'm perfectly fine with just swiping and tapping all over the display. The display, despite its small size, is quite bright and quite pretty. Text and items naturally show up very well, and the dark AMOLED display makes it actually very difficult to differentiate between what's the actual display itself and what are the bezels, which I think Google did very well on that a lot of other watch manufacturers can't really master. The UI and experience itself is what I'd call relatively basic. I mean, while there have been different ways of doing the same things on smartwatches for quite a few years now, none of them have really struck me as that's the one. That's it. That's exactly how I want to use my smartwatch. Like many other watch manufacturers, Google has focused on the concept of basically core widgets that you swipe left and right to get to. You swipe up to get to your notifications, you swipe down to get to quick settings, and then you press the crown in order to access all your applications. Now, those applications will either be viewed in two types of lists, but both of them are long lists that are relatively hard to get through, and that's it. That's basically the experience. Now, the widgets are pretty core to the experience, but I found that there's a lot of applications that I would like to have a widget of, but unfortunately do not. And that's just kind of a side effect of going with Wear OS. And really, I don't feel like I'm interacting with this device much more than the process of tracking workouts and getting notifications. It's not a new problem to smartwatches, the fact that we don't really have a lot of good use cases for what we want them to be. Now, as I'm now a software developer, I've started to think of ways that I might want to leverage a smartwatch or another display that would help my user's experience. But it's kind of tough to imagine exactly what we might want a device on our wrist to do other than just deliver us faster ways to get to the exact same things that we might do on our phone by pulling it out of our pockets. I love the fact that I can easily fast forward to the next song on Spotify on my wrist, and I love the fact that I can easily start a workout from my wrist, but the fact is realistically, unless I could really master the experience of having it all packaged into one device, there's not a lot of reason to have that medium. For example, I prefer just having dedicated earbuds that I can swipe and tap on to control audio or fast forward or rewind. That's what I need out of a music experience. While it could be also covered by a smartwatch, it's kind of duplicative since most of the times when I'm listening to music or controlling my music, I also have those earbuds in. I was super excited, and so much so that I actually tried to start switching to Fitbit before the Pixel Watch came out. I was very excited about the concept of having a dedicated fitness system on the watch that really was built as part of the watch experience. Granted, technically you could use Google Fit in the past on other watches, or you could use Samsung Health on Samsung smartwatches, but both of those I felt were pretty bad comparative experiences to the equivalent that you'd get on an Apple Watch, which really feels like it's built as a health and fitness product. So, Pixel Watch, Fitbit, combined, how's the experience? Fitbit on the Google Watch, it's not bad. Fitbit is bad. I don't understand why. I haven't used a Fitbit in maybe 6 or 7 years, and so I thought it's been years. Fitbit for a long time was the #1 fitness tracker. They've got to be able to catch up with the Apple Watch in terms of fitness experience because the Apple Watch isn't a dedicated fitness tracker. So Fitbit's probably doing pretty well, right? And then I started using the Fitbit application. And I'm just like, the Fitbit app sucks. It's slow. It's convoluted. It doesn't have a good user experience. Nothing makes sense. Like nothing's where you'd expect it to be. And to be able to do anything, it just feels like you've got to go through like 5 or 6 taps. And it feels also like it's not nearly as integrated with Google as you would expect it to be. Like I fully expected the Pixel Watch to just be a Fitbit experience. But it still feels like super separated. And I don't know if they were obligated to do this or they just couldn't get there, but I didn't understand it. And I almost wish that there was a dedicated health product for the Pixel Watch. Unless Fitbit really pulls in information from every other service, which it felt like it wasn't very consistent to me, I'm fine with having a dedicated health app on my watch because that's what I had to do with the Apple Watch in the first place. Now, one thing that I did find relatively recently is that Google does seem to be updating the experience on Wear OS. It does feel like it's improving. Most recently, they just actually got support for the Peloton application. So now that I happen to have a Peloton bike, I don't have to wear my Apple Watch to track my heart rate on the Peloton bike. Instead, I can do it from my Pixel Watch, which is good. You know what's kind of funny? The Peloton bike is just an Android tablet glued to a exercise bike. Obviously, there's some unique software in there, but for the most part, it's just an Android tablet. And the fact that it was more compatible with the Apple Watch for so many years rather than Android Wear, it's pretty revealing about the whole Android ecosystem, which I know they're working on. They're doing well. I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud. Doing well. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. You got it. I can't believe I've made it this far, and one of my biggest frustrations about every single smartwatch I didn't stop to talk about, and that's the comfort. Now, let me see. 1 second. Galaxy Watch. This is a 4. This is a Galaxy Watch 4 because I got rid of my Galaxy Watch 5. Okay. Now, I want you to just look at that. Okay, just look at that. Let me take off my Pixel Watch. And I want you to look at this. Tell me if you see anything different between these two watches. Anything different? What if I go like this? See the difference now? The Galaxy Watch, and this was the case with the Galaxy Watch 5 as well, has a tendency to make the band such that it sticks outwards from the watch. And so the result is the Galaxy Watch sits a lot higher on my wrist to the point where it's very uncomfortable. It's one of two options. Either I have to keep it loose and the watch bumps around, or I have to get it tight and then I'm really, tightening it against my wrist and it's very uncomfortable. Those are my two options with Galaxy Watch. The Pixel Watch, you can see the watch band goes downwards right outside of the actual case itself. And the result is it actually curves around your wrist. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? Innovation. It amazes me that the Galaxy Watch was uncomfortable for all these years and I couldn't figure out why. And it was that. It was just that. It was just the positioning of the way that the case kind of melded into the band. And I've tried a couple different Pixel Watch bands, but this is the out-of-the-box one, and it's perfectly comfortable for me. It's not my favorite, but it's perfectly comfortable. I tried a lot of different Galaxy Watch bands, and none of them were comfortable for me. Tried flexible ones, tried stiff ones, tried metal ones. After hours of typing on the keyboard, it just felt like it was constricting my wrist. It was like holding it in a, headlock. And the Pixel Watch I can wear for a substantial amount longer, and I don't have any sort of wrist strain. And maybe that's not the case with a lot of other people, but it just blew my mind. One of the features that I was actually kind of excited about with the Pixel Watch is sleep tracking. Because frankly, since it's pretty comfortable and since I actually didn't mind wearing it for long periods of time, I thought sleep tracking was a great feature to have. And honestly, the experience was just very lackluster. It doesn't feel that integrated. And there's a dedicated Pixel Watch app, and I couldn't tell you exactly what I could do in that versus any sort of Wear OS apps versus the Fitbit app. It's a little bit convoluted. Now, I don't have much to say on the performance. This felt generally snappy after a couple months of bug fixes. I will say that the first couple months, if I had reviewed this within the first couple weeks of having it, I would have been so negative about it because there were so many different bugs that made the experience terrible. So Google needs to work on releasing products that really are complete, and I'm hoping that the Pixel Fold doesn't have the same bugs, but I'm worried that it will. But since then, it's become relatively stable, relatively consistent. The performance is great. The battery life is something that a lot of people had concerns about. They were worried that they were going to get, less than a day, but I have the LTE version of the watch. Now, granted, it's usually connected to my phone, but even so, I didn't have any problems with battery life. Now, granted, I was generally charging it every single night. But even if I didn't, if I woke up from bed at 8 a.m. and then wore the watch throughout the day overnight, then generally in the morning, I would have maybe 10 or 15% battery life remaining. And I'd have to charge it, when I was in the shower or whatever. Now, it wasn't charging fast enough to complete an entire cycle when I was in the shower. So chances are sometime during that day, I'd have to take it off and put it back on the charger. That sucks. And what also sucks is the fact that it doesn't have a universal charger. It doesn't use the same sort of Qi charging that the Galaxy Watch does, for example. This Galaxy Watch, whenever I need to charge it, I can just put it on the back of my Galaxy phone or my Pixel 7 Pro and it charges. This Pixel Watch does not charge on the back of the Pixel 7 Pro, despite the Pixel 7 Pro having wireless charging. I don't understand. It seems like an obvious thing, but even if it did have, native Qi charging, then obviously the way that the band is would make it pretty difficult to sit flat on the back of a phone. And so that's another thing they would possibly have to change in order to fix it with the Pixel Watch 2. It doesn't make sense to me though. Like, I have several different Qi chargers around the house. I have several different watch chargers dedicated for small watches that have Qi charging built in that don't work with the Pixel Watch. You could even magnetize the Apple Watch charger to the back of this, but it wouldn't do anything. It buzzes, but it doesn't actually charge. If Google offered very, very cheap extra chargers, or they had 2 chargers in the box, or had some other solution, then it would make me feel better about it, but it's a little bit of a bummer. All that being said, the Pixel Watch just feels like it got it right the first time, which I know it's very, very difficult for people to really expect Google hardware to be competitive with Apple's or Samsung's, but the Pixel Watch, after its initial, bug fixing process, just feels like a really complete product that they put a lot of thought into. And I know they did. It worked on the Android team. And while I can't give any particular details, I know that Google worked very hard, or the Android team worked very hard on the Pixel Watch, and the Pixel team did as well. Honestly, I am proud of the Pixel Watch because Google's honestly the underdog when it comes to hardware. It's very difficult for Google to come up with a product that can be directly competitive with Samsung and Apple. And the Pixel Watch is exactly that. And I have loved my experience using it. And for Pixel fans, I can't recommend it enough. Now, I will say that $350 is a lot of money for a smartwatch. And it's often, especially if you have a phone like the Pixel 7a, for example, it's comparable to the price that you might be paying for a phone, which is why Google and Samsung have always struggled to compete with Apple when it comes to volume of smartwatch sales. Because if someone's paying $1,000 for a phone, which most Apple users are, then it's really comparatively easy for them to afford a $350 smartwatch. If someone's paying $550 for a Samsung Galaxy A series, then ponying up $350 for a smartwatch seems to be a lot more difficult. Now, I will say that smartwatches have a tendency, at least for me, to have a longer life than smartphones. I don't cycle out my smartwatches as much as frequently, but it's still a big price point for people. And I think maybe with the Pixel Watch 2, Google should also consider a Pixel Watch 2a, something that a lot more people could access realistically with their Pixel 7a and still get the Pixel Watch experience. But who knows whether that will come. This has been InnoIso. I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching. There's going to be more videos just like this coming out soon, so be sure to get subscribed if you liked it. Like the video, let me know in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. See ya.